Hey there everybody, welcome back with the Plat and welcome to another guide video for One Step from Eden. Really quick before we get into the guide video, I want to shout out my Twitch. I stream live on Twitch at twitch.tv/Purplatypus. There's a link in the description, you can come hang out. I stream a lot of One Step from Eden. I also have been recently streaming Final Fantasy VII Remake. I won't lie, I really like the game, I'm having a good time. I really like Final Fantasy VII, alright? I know I'm a poser like everyone else. We'll get back to Eden. Let me just have this time to play that game that I really like, alright? But anyway, to the guide. What we're going to be talking about today is I'm going to be ranking from hardest to easiest the characters in terms of how difficult they are to learn, how easy they are to learn from a new player's perspective to me. First thing you're going to notice, we don't have all the loadouts, so I'm not going to really talk about the secondary loadouts because I'm going to assume they haven't beaten the game. But the fact that I haven't unlocked the secondary loadout for all the characters will also kind of, I think, double down as evidence for what I think about their first loadout. In terms of learning, but also the reason I'm kind of avoiding it is, like, let's say this I think is a good example. Shizo, like, I think Kunai is insanely good, but I don't think Execute is as good, and because you need to win it with Execute before you get Kunai, I don't think it is applicable to a new player's guide. Also, the Shopkeeper I haven't unlocked. I also just don't think that's really relevant to the guide because the Shopkeeper is really hard to unlock, and if you have the Shopkeeper, you are unlikely to still be a new player, and it does not really apply to you. So, without further ado, let's jump into it. You probably already guessed it, if you've played all the characters besides the Shopkeeper. I think Terabreak is probably the hardest character to win with. Her kit is just, it's self-synergistic, there's no doubt about that, but it's really hard to use. It requires a lot of mana and just a lot of positional knowledge, a lot of boss knowledge and enemy knowledge, and you could get some serious damage if if you spend 1 mana to break a tile behind an enemy, and then you spend 2 more mana to flurry them, so you just use your full thing of mana, and you're doing good damage at that point. But then then you have Mine, and that sucks. It just, Excavate is pretty bad. Mine is terrible. Excavate is pretty much bad all the time unless you get a super build around it. Entangle is like okay. So really your entire kit is a weaker than average weapon, in my opinion, a average artifact that does synergize with your weapon, I will admit, and Flurry, which is really good, honestly. But Flurry is not enough to win you the run alone, even if you have like something like Entangle and can do this. So if you want to beat the game, I don't recommend practicing with Terabreak first. This is a character I've been struggling with, but I still think I still think it's good. I think it just requires a lot more knowledge. So for the second hardest, I'm gonna go with Violet Double Time. And I don't think it's that Violet Double Time is weak, actually. I think Violet Double Time might be a stronger character than some of the other characters that are gonna be higher up in terms of better, in my opinion, on this list. I think it's just because Violet is very complex. I think actually more complex than Terra, probably the most complex character to go. It's just because this right trigger, or whatever the attack button is, the weapon, it has 5 different effects depending on where you step. It adds a whole other layer of things you have to think about, which is not good from a new player's perspective. You want to focus on dodging and not have to think about, when you use your weapon, do I move to the left? Do I move to the right? Do I move up? Do I move down? Do I stay where I am? Each effect is something different. Back gives you shield, front gives you an attack. You stay where you are to give yourself fragile. You go up to give yourself Trinity, and you go down to give yourself a mana regen, which is probably the best form. You want to do shield, mana regen a lot of the time, in my opinion. Or, I get Trinity is good too. They're all like good, except for the fragile, even though there is synergies with that. But it's so much to think about, especially when you're learning boss patterns and enemy patterns. When you use this and you're like, I really need mana regen right now. So you use this and you want to go down, but then you see an enemy is going down. Then you have to make another decision. Do I go there? Do I do it? I just wasted a mana. Do I just give myself fragile because I kind of get stun locked for a second? I don't know what to do. So also, Artifact, I think, is below average for sure. Gain spell power equal to half your fragile stacks. Now, of course, this scales, technically infinitely. But let's say, hypothetically, you use Grace 20 times to give yourself 20 fragile and give yourself 10 spell power. Even if you spend 20 mana, give yourself 20 fragile, and don't manage to not get hit at all, and you get 10 spell power out of it, which is like one of the most extreme, I think, situations possible for how good this could be. That's it's not good. 10 spell power is great for some spells, but she doesn't synergize with anything to start with any of her hits. Now, if you go for minigun, obviously minigun is Trinity and it synergizes with Feather, but even then you're dedicating so much effort into getting yourself a little bit of spell power, and you're giving yourself fragile, which is going to increase the damage you take on top of it. I feel like it's a trap for new people rather than actually just being good. Now, if you're good at the game, I think that this is totally different. I think this character is, again, one of the more powerful ones because of the flexibility of the attacks. But from a new player, I think it's kind of a trap character overall. So this one might be a little controversial, but I actually think Hazel is one of the harder characters to win with from a new player. I think it's mostly because Hexawand is not that strong, and I'll admit the gun turret is strong, and she even has a great artifact in terms of giving you free shielding when you summon something. There's not that many spells that are really good with this because there's a lot of bad structures you can basically waste mana on, but there are a couple really good ones that if you have a smaller deck, you could cycle through really fast to get a lot of shields. But and she even has a weapon that makes her turret stronger. The thing is, her starting kit is kind of a one-trick pony, right? You do have the minigun, but minigun base form without any upgrades, without any spell power, without any additional Trinity synergy is kind of weak, for sure, actually. Not, you know, it could do good damage, but it's not incredible. And just the turret, I feel this character requires a lot of practice because you need to know where to place your turrets. You need to know how bosses attacks. My emphasis for usually hardest to easiest, as you could tell, is what you have to think about when you're fighting bosses. The more you have to think about your own character and what you have to do in order to get damage in, instead of just getting damage in you can while focusing on dodging, I'm gonna consider a harder character to use. Even if they're not necessarily weaker, I think they're harder to use. And so deciding where you put your turrets is really tough. So typically what you're gonna wanna do, which most people don't do this at the start, is you're gonna wanna build your turrets as far forward as possible. A lot of people, I'll see a lot of people, myself included sometimes, just you kind of default, you're in the back row, trying to stay as far away from the enemy as possible, and you're putting your turrets down, you're hitting it, right? You're just getting as much damage in. And the issue with that is that not only does the turret block one of your dodging tiles, but also if you ever have to dodge, you know, left or right, or sorry, up and down, the turret could be in your way, but if you have to go around a little bit, your own turret could hit you in the back, right? So if you have to dodge into a tile where your turret is shooting every few seconds and you've fucking powered it up with 30 spell power or some shit, this thing could easily kill you. Especially, there's just some, Terra as a boss can really lock you down. If you get into a bad position, it could be incredibly tough. So learning to put this turret further forward so you don't have to think about it, and then dodging forward when you can to upgrade it when you can. It's also less likely to take damage in general when you do that. But because you're kind of a one-trick pony, and I think the way you want to play this character is a little counterintuitive to what you would expect, I think that this character is a bit harder to pick up for newer players, even though you would think something where you just build a turret and then run away would be easy. I think the way the game plays out actually makes her a little bit harder than you would expect. Next up is going to be Shizo's, or Shizo. I'm sorry, the names, you know, I'm terrible at names. It's going to be Execute. Now, if we're getting to the point where I think everything's actually pretty good, but requires, you kind of just don't have to play this guy, I feel like. So Claw Trap's pretty terrible. Align, surprisingly flexible, not amazing. I would never take this spell, but being in a starting deck, you could find use for it. Step Slash, we'll talk about it later, phenomenal. Orbital Beam, this is actually surprisingly hard to hit with. I really wish Terra had this spell though. It hits 4 tiles away, so it's like a Thunder for double mana, but it hits for, right, 860 instead of, or you can hit, you can move around, hit 4 different tiles with it, break a bunch of tiles. But this doesn't fully make sense to me. I guess that the idea is you claw traps them, and when they get into it, then you orbital beam them for a bunch of damage. But really, this is all kind of just fluff. He has no artifact, as you can see. One of the few characters, maybe the only one with no artifact. Actually, I don't know off the top of my head, but Linchpin, his weapon is really what this character is all about. So this deals damage equal to half of your money, flat out. So it does X damage, right? Half your money. Lose 3 money whenever you shoot this gun, but if you kill something with it, you gain 10 money. So what this means is this weapon gets really, really strong relatively early, but I think a lot of players will fall into what I would consider a trap still of never spending money. Just get as much money as possible, make this as strong as possible, and then beat the game with this weapon. I think that's the wrong way to look at it. I think that's, obviously this weapon can do some serious damage. You get 300 money, you're doing 150 for 0, right? And sometimes you're just gaining money off of that. I think what you typically want to do though, is use this to generate extra money. Do your best in every single fight to kill every single enemy with this gun to generate as much money as possible. And then use that money in the shops to give yourself more artifacts, more spells, more upgrades, more removals. You just spend this money. Don't just hoard the money for all time. Now, if you get a Sarah Cannon, which is a specific spell, that's different. That's something that does damage equal to your money. If you get double cast on that, you have 500 money, plus, you know, it's like, it gets broken. That's a build on its own. But I think people fall into the trap of just trying to make this gun as strong as possible, when I really think you should look at this weapon as a resource generating weapon. Use the money that this gives you to make yourself stronger, and then by the end of the run, probably you're not even using the gun at all. This is like an early weapon, plus one thing you should say, anchor, it takes like 2 fucking seconds to fire this thing. This thing is, it will get you hurt a lot. You typically don't want to use it on bosses. I don't know if you can actually use this to generate money from executing bosses. That's a good question. I haven't paid attention to that much. I would assume you could, because it is a kill, but I guess we'd have to see. But yeah, generate resources. Don't fall into the trap of thinking that this weapon is your entire build on its own. Next up, we're gonna talk about Slicey, or Slicey as I like to call her, because she uses blades. So there was actually a buff where this caused 0 and it did 100 damage. I think they nerfed it a bit again. I think it might have been a little too powerful. Anyway, that's not really beside the point. So I think this character a lot of people have a really hard time with, but I actually think this character is surprisingly powerful for a new player. I think the artifact starting with 40 shield every single fight is a huge buff. This is the kind of thing that'll save you, you know, on average, probably if you take damage normally, 40 HP every single fight that you go into. And I think because of that, it will allow you to potentially have more HP when reaching bosses, and then when you defeat bosses, and then being able to move into executing bosses, not needing the healing. And I think when you're able to avoid the healing, just because you're taking less damage overall, you get more powerful faster, and this helps propel your run into a more strong synergistic run overall. We'll talk about our weapon in a second. Ice Needle, incredibly powerful in my opinion. It only attacks for 20, right? But you fire a piercing, returning shot, apply frost on hit. It applies frost, boom, and then it comes back, hits again for 20 if they're in the same spot. It sometimes only hit with 1 of 2 if they like dodge out of the way. But you hit them with frost once, hit them with frost twice, you did 40 damage. And this spell is normally not very good on most characters. But because it's on Slicey here, her weapon, it does cost the mana, so you gotta be very careful about this. You can't just spam it. But you dash to deal 80 damage per frost stack on the target. So normally frost, when you get up to 3, it explodes for 100 damage. So this though, you spend 1 mana, you deal 80 damage per frost, and you regenerate 1 mana per frost on them. So on 3, it's self-destruct. So you wanna do it at 2 every single time. Doing it at 1 is totally fine as well. It's a free attack. It's gonna do 90 damage. It does 80 damage plus the default 10. But if you have 2 frosts on it, you're actually generating mana. You're also doing 170 damage. You're doing 80 times 2 plus 10. So this getting 2 frosts on an enemy, right, does 40 damage. But then you're suddenly hitting them for an additional 170 and generating all the mana that you spent on this back. And it's just like super synergistic. Her weapon is really what brings her whole kit together. A lot of spells that I think are a bit weaker that she starts with are made so much stronger by this weapon. Cold Medicine, for example. Shot heals the target by 40 HP and applies 2 frost. So this is 0 mana, heal the target by 40 on some characters. What it is on Slicey is 0 damage, heal them by 40, and then it's deal, right, 170 damage and recover 2 mana. This is negative 2 mana a lot of times if you hit them with it, and it's, or I guess negative 1 because your attack costs 1. So it will recover you 1 mana, and it'll help you do 170 damage to the target. That's pretty freaking incredible. So Cold Medicine on Slicey, so much better than on other characters. Face Shield just got buffed. It used to go all 4 rows and move to the right. It gains you 200 shield, but you lose all that shield when it actually hits someone. But like, holy crap, is this so good. They actually made it stronger, so I think it's only 3 wide or 2 wide now. I don't remember exactly, but it was already nuts before. Now the thing is, this is really bad against Slicey as the boss, and a few other bosses like Hazel, who summons things on your sides, but things like the wall, where you need to go to get your loadout, so you're gonna be fighting a lot, and like just a lot of bosses, like even Rava, Saffron, Violet, characters that don't really invade your territory that much. This is so good at, like, it just, you 200 shield and you can run forward and just tank 200 damage without even thinking about it, because once this hits someone, you're gonna lose the shield anyway. So you just go up, you don't mind taking damage. You basically get free damage, and then you kind of back up when you're gonna start taking HP damage, because when this hits, then you lose the shield anyway. So it's a free temporary buff, and it's a huge buff. 200 for 1 mana is awesome. And finally, Zenith. Now, this is kind of scary to use. It attacks on your spot, and a 3x3 explosion can hit self. So 0 mana, 150 damage is nuts, but you can hit yourself. So what you want to do is you want to cast this, and there's like a half-second delay. You want to cast this, and then you want to dash. You want to use your attack, right? This dashes you forward 4 tiles. And so if you do that, you cast this, then dash, you're going to throw Zenith down in their territory. And when it's in their territory, it's a 3x3. That's huge. That's 9 out of the, of the tiles. There's not that many tiles on their side in general. So it's really, most enemies are going to get hit by this if you place it well. It's a ton of damage. And it's really, this is better against rooms than it is bosses. Getting a boss for 150 is nice for 0. But it's much better, in my opinion, against rooms where there's a bunch of enemies clumped together, where 150 can almost execute a lot of them. And if it doesn't execute it, then a quick cold medicine, ice needle on some, and then slashing them will start chaining you together a lot of kills there. Next up is going to be Rava. So I think that Rava is, the reason she's number 3, or I guess number 4, instead of probably number 2, honestly, is because when you play as Rava, you can't save Rava. And so I think the fact that you can never get a revive as this character is a debuff that other characters don't have to deal with, but it's kind of undone by her having such a powerful artifact and weapon in general. Just her kit is incredibly powerful. So gain 1 shield whenever you move. Every time you take a step, you gain a shield. You'll be surprised at how much shield this generates if you haven't played her before. Holy crap, you get a lot of shields just jumping around. You get more than Slicey's 40 per battle, typically. I mean, short fights you won't, but like on bosses and stuff, fuck yeah, you will. Reflector gem, so you don't have a normal attack, which could be hard to adjust, but you just reflect attacks for a short duration. It's like a half second or something. But like, this is so good against some fights where you know they're gonna hit you with a bunch of shit really quick. You have full mana, and you just start holding R right trigger, your weapon button, just and it just reflects it all back on them, does insane damage. You take 0 damage. This does require a bit of timing and knowledge, but it is still really good overall. Shield catch, 1 mana, 60 shield, nuts. You don't need to actually catch it. You have a second after it hits the ground to pick it up. Shield throw, this is one I'd probably recommend removing from your deck, even though it's absolutely busted. Fire shots equal to your damage, equal to your shield. Lose all your shield, and then you catch it to regain your shield. The issue is if you miss with this, so on the wall, it's really good, but you're gonna be taking a lot of damage probably if you're new. Or even if you're experienced, it's a hard boss to avoid damage on. If you miss with this, you just lose all your shields. So this could lead to you dying a lot of times if you're going with really heavy shields, if you just miss, especially against bosses. So it's something that I would consider a bit of a trap, even though it is really good and there's a lot of fun things you could do. Like if you have a fate shield and you're about to lose the 200 armor, you could shield throw this instead. And so you lose the 200 armor of your 0 armor, then you catch this and you actually regain that 200 armor that you would have lost. So there's like fun things you could do here, but I think this is more of a high skill, high risk, high reward kind of thing. And if you're taking a lot of damage anyway, it could just be a 1 mana deal 0 damage thing, right? You need a lot of shield and defense to do this. Diagonal beam, phenomenal. Holy crap, is this good. It scales incredible with spell power, or pretty good with spell power at least. And it, now I will say, this is gonna kill hostages. No matter what you do, you're gonna be killing hostages left and right when you try to diagonal beam. This is an IQ 400 thing, but it hits for so much damage, and it's pretty easy to hit with. Even if you don't aim it, there's a good chance. You just have like a 50-50 chance of hitting with it, even if you don't know where you're fucking aiming it. It's just really, really good. I love it. But honestly, I think Shield Beam might be her best spell. 2 damage, gain 20 shield, anchor. So when this hits, gain 20 shield. So it hits twice. So you gain 40 shield and do 40 damage, and it's piercing, so it hits the entire row. If you get double cast on this, or you get, basically double cast, right? This gives you 80 shield. You are anchored, but you don't really care when you're gaining 80 shield over the course of a few seconds. So Rava's just got so much defense going on. The defense that does translate into offense, but also when you have such a good defensive start, it's exactly what I was saying before. It can be hard to get damage in early, but if you take some damaging things early, this can translate to getting more artifacts from executing bosses, more dangerous routes, less healing needed. And I think this translates to a stronger run, although I do think in the late game, she can be a bit weaker if you're inexperienced due to the lack of a revive on a potentially your worst boss that you're at or something. So third up, we're gonna have Manafire Gunner. Now this one I'm not gonna talk too much about. It's pretty darn simple. So now there's a meme dream. The meme dream is with this, you just get time slow. It's the 1 mana double lift spell, slow time for 3 seconds. Your attack is instant, with M4 Manafire, and if you're hitting enemies under time slow, you just generate more mana than what you spent, and you shuffle immediately after you cast time slow. And if you just keep doing that, it's almost possible to keep enemies in a permanent lock state while you just mash them really, really hard. And on top, you have an artifact that gives you +5 attack damage while shuffling. So this actually doubles the attack of your weapon. You just get insane damage by just getting time slow. So that's what you're looking for, number one. It's got like a 1-card, not guaranteed victory, but insane run, at least. So, but outside of that, pretty simple character. PK Fire, don't really know why it starts with this. It's powerful, I like it. Innervate, blue bullets. Obviously, this means that you scale. The longer a fight goes, the more you scale. Shot deals damage equal to your current mana. You gain a max mana. You add a jam to your deck. Jam doesn't get reshuffled in if you shuffle it, but if you cast it, it's gone, so it's consumed. So you don't have to worry about it. Every time you innervate, yeah, it gives you a max mana, but it makes your blue bullets 1 point stronger, and this hits 20 times for 1 mana. So if fight goes on long enough, you get up to 11 mana, or 9 mana or whatever. You're hitting for really, this is without any spell damage too. If you get any spell damage, just gets even stronger. So these are a pretty great synergy. His weapon is his mana regen's actually, I think, 0 though. This is one thing that's kind of hard to deal with. You're mostly focusing on dealing damage with your weapon for this, which is why I think this character is a little bit easier to win with, because it is very powerful. You hit a beam that hits the whole row. It does good damage. It attacks constantly and consistently. You don't have to think about it much. You can focus on dodging while just getting attacks in. But you do generate mana whenever you hit with your weapon, which is why accuracy, I guess, is important, but mostly you just care about firing most of the time. So one thing that this weapon synergizes really well with is the bomb toss. So bomb toss, you could just hit an enemy with to do 150 damage. You could throw it, but if you throw it into a lane, you could just start attacking this with your gun. You could hit this to generate your mana that you need. So if you get this like in front of an enemy, you start hitting this and the enemy, you're generating a ton of mana. This blows up, hits them. Then you have enough, innervate blue bullets. Just keep firing, keep shuffling, keep firing, keep shuffling. It's a character that you just don't have to think that much about overall, which is why I think they're so powerful. You're really focused on this weapon, and it's not hard to get completely busted, I feel, with this character overall. So the final two are both going to be Saffron. We'll just tackle them at the same time. So I think it's tough. I think the second one, number 2, is actually going to be default Saffron. Now, the reason I'm not putting this at number 1, even though you have a revive, is I guess we'll get to it in Chrono. But the reason this is number 2 and over so many of the other characters is you have a revive. The two main reasons. You have a revive, you have a decent weapon. The weapon is not as good as Gunner's and by any stretch of the imagination, but it is constant chip damage that you never need to worry about. You can just keep attacking forever, and if you focus on dodging and avoiding damage, you will eventually kill enemies just by holding down the weapon button. Now, the fact that she also has a revive means she's the only character that gets 2 revives. You get one from Rava if you spare Rava, and you get this one, right? So this gives you a double chance to beat like final bosses or your particularly worst boss. It lets you get further into a run than you would with most other characters, especially against something they're really bad against. But on top of that, she starts with really good spells. Thunder, 1 mana, deal 100 damage. This is, it can be hard to hit with, but against bosses, but honestly, not as hard as you would think. It attacks pretty much instantly. Very powerful, 1 mana, 100 damage. Kinetic Wave, very powerful. The closer they are to you, to the front tile, and the closer you are to the front tile, the better this gets. If you're both in the front tile, this hits for 160 because it pushes them back, hits them, push them back, hit them, push them back, hit them. Now, if they're in the back row, this gets worse. If you're in your back row, you're gonna want to move forward before you cast this. But it's really good against multiple enemies, right? If there's a bunch of enemies in a row, you just kind of hit them all for good damage. It's kind of AoE. Fantastic spell. Step Slash, another fantastic spell. You jump forward, hit everything in like a 2x3 square. I think it's 2x3 of with 80 damage for 2. It's just really good. It hits a lot of enemies. Very, very, very easy to land, which is a huge benefit of this spell. Spells that are easy to land, I think, are better than what the numbers would suggest. Than something that costs 0 mana but does 2,000 damage, but it's literally impossible to hit with. Like, that's worse potentially. When 2,000 is 250 damage. Like mine does 250 damage. This is 80 damage. This is better than mine because you can actually hit with this most of the time. Frostbolt, probably your weakest spell, but it lets you kind of get into a frost build. Every third one you do, this does an extra 100 damage, right? Every third one you land. If you get any other frost energy, this gets better, but it's a weaker spell, but still 1 mana, 40 damage, hits a row. You don't need to, it's not like Thunder where it hits 1 tile, it hits the whole thing. So if they're in the back, you don't need to worry about your distance. You don't need to worry about the 2 terms of vectors. You don't need to be on the right row and the right column. You just need to be in the right, column or whatever, and then you fire it, and then you get there. So the reason that she's not number 1 over Chrono is the artifact. Okay, I'll be honest. It's wristwatch. Slow time for 2 seconds. This is what you're looking for when you're playing as Gunner because it's so powerful. Now, wristwatch, it just helps you do everything in this game better. It slows down time. If this game was constantly in a slow down time for 2 seconds, you would never get hit again by basically anything. And so basically what this does is it lets you, anytime you want throughout the whole run, is hit your weapon button to get guaranteed dodges on really, like, boss ultimates. I mean, sometimes they last longer than 2 seconds, but things that are like really, really hard to avoid that you know you're gonna get hit by, you're in a bad position, you need to get to the other side, you really wanna land a spell because you have a powerful spell, but it's hard to hit. This makes all of that stuff so much easier. And I cannot emphasize enough how powerful I think wristwatch is comparatively to almost everything else, every starting weapon in the game. Also though, she may not get a revive outside of Rava's, but you do get Heart of the Cards. So heal HP equal to the number of spells in your deck at the start of battle. The fact that you start with this, yeah, you're only healing 4 HP when you start. But you know, your runs, typically it's gonna get bigger, but even if you don't get that much more stuff, this is still healing, that is consistent. It's not always super good, and I don't wanna oversell it, but if you decide to go with a build that's a bit more, you know, with a bigger deck, which is probably what I'd recommend, you get just so much healing. You do get a lot of healing. It means you can avoid the camps, you can avoid saving bosses, you can execute the bosses, get stronger as early as possible. And so Heart of the Cards is not phenomenal, but it is a defensive artifact, which I think is typically better than the offensive ones. This is from a new player's perspective. Now, the really thing that is also killer though is her spells are all so good. So Thunder is killer. Like when you could stop time for 1 mana, I know you're spending 2 mana for Thunder, but when you could freeze time for 2 seconds, you go up to them, you just thunder them, boom, 100 damage. It becomes really easy to land it. Step Slash is so easy to land all the time. We just talked about it. It's really good. Whirlwind though, you can see it does 30 damage times 6. So talk about like a lot of damage for a 2 mana investment. The issue is that it's 3 tiles in front and it hits kind of slowly. But you freeze time, you go up and you whirlwind them, and they're just fucking toast. They've got no chance. You're just lighting them up. This is so easy to land on bosses with wristwatch. And another reason she's really good is she starts with minigun. Now, only 2 characters start with minigun, right? I think it's only Hazel and Saffron. And even though I wasn't too keen on it with Hazel, I think this is better with Saffron than it is on Hazel, because you have a lot of things that you kind of like. This already scales with spell power pretty well because it hits multiple times, but like your artifact doesn't get, I guess, like, it's hard to explain. Hazel, I think if you try to get a lot of spell power and stuff to make minigun really good, you're kind of hurting her kit overall, because minigun can't attack through the gun turret, right? You'll shoot it in the back, so either your gun turret's hitting it or your minigun is. It doesn't, the things you get to make minigun really good don't synergize with Hex Badge. But Saffron, I don't think suffers from that at all. Like I think minigun would be good on Hazel if her kit was just different. But minigun, right? You don't put any structures down that get in your way. The things that you get to make minigun better are typically going to synergize with everything else you get. It's going to be increased spell damage, just increased damage in general. Doubling, minigun is really good. Doubling minigun is really good. Getting an additional Trinity is really good on Saffron. So yeah, I guess that's basically it. I think Saffron Chrono is the best character for newer players because of exactly that, because of the wristwatch mostly. But also the fact that she got such an incredibly strong level of starting spells. It is so easy to dish out good damage. And so you dish out insane damage. You have the best defensive weapon in the game, not the best defensive artifact, but the best defensive weapon, where you have a panic button. You have a built-in panic button for the entire run. You just get out of the way. It's like, oh shit, how do I avoid this? Oh, I know, I hit right trigger and I move over there. There we go, their attack is whiffed for 1 mana. So you do want to get mana regen early on, I think, though, as this character, because wristwatch does cost 1. You only start with 3. You definitely want to be able to cast spells and use this in the same time, so focus on getting mana regen early. Well, guys, that's going to be it. Thank you so much for watching. Sorry, this video went a lot longer than I was actually expecting it to, and we only did, the default loadouts for each character and then Saffron's Chrono, but I do plan on doing more like maybe a tier list style video, going through the rest of them, maybe doing specific guides for specific loadouts and stuff like that. But I kind of wanted to do, again, keep with the theme of what I've been doing, is start with a new player friendly guide, and hopefully my guides get more and more advanced as they go. That way you guys can kind of level up with me, right? Get a little bit stronger, a little bit better at the game by following my guides over time. And not just jump into like, why is the shopkeeper overpowered? Why is, you know, I want to keep it intro level and move to more advanced as we go on. So guys, I hope you found this useful. If you liked it, leave a comment down below. If you hated it, leave a comment down below. I'm open to whatever you gotta say to me. But that's it. The Purplatypus is Purplatypus. See you next time, friends.